Hello, good afternoon. Now, is going to uni worth it? In a week where we've had some fairly clickbaity titles from UK newspapers on this subject, we're joined today by author Michael Tefula to talk about his new book of the same title. So more on that as we get into the show. Welcome to the We Are Careers show. For the uninitiated among you, this is our fortnightly CPD opportunity for careers professionals all across the sector, looking at engaging and kind of relevant key topics and issues facing the sector at this point in time. Each week we delve into a particular topic and also look at all the latest CDI and careers news from across the sector, brought to you by myself and my wonderful co-host. So for those who've not met me before, my name is Chris Webb. I'm a higher education careers professional and RCDP with the Career Development Institute, and I'm having a pretty good day so far. I'm joined today, as always, by my fantastic co-host, meet Sabiha. So Sabiha, how are you doing today?
Do you know what? I'm also having a really great day today. It's actually flown by, so it's great to see everybody here. And for those of you that are joining us for the very first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's always great to have new viewers. And if you haven't already, for those of you that are regulars, please do hit that subscribe and bell button if you're watching us on YouTube. But if you're using another platforms such as Facebook or LinkedIn, make sure you set those reminders so that you never miss these opportunities and the fantastic guests that we get. As Chris said, I'm known as Meet Sabiha. I work internationally, helping young professionals get unstuck and get back into career flow without the stress. And I'm also the creator of the I Am Thriving Career Coaching Program, where I teach international coaches on how to help their clients create even more powerful transformation without wasting resources and time on tools that don't work. We always begin the show by giving a shout out, because we love to celebrate, yes, you the viewers, in particularly those of you that are members of the CDI and are now registered career practitioners. So I want to encourage all of you. And today's theme, we're going to be looking at, as Chris said, a very topical theme and a very relevant theme is Uni Worth It. So I'm going to encourage those of you that are watching right now, let us know if you can hear and see us. Come and tell us, use the comments features to let us know where are you watching from right now. Also as well, what type of work, what kind of career professional are you? And what part of the world are you watching from as well? And so each show, we celebrate the newest RCDP members of the CDI community. And if you're wondering, what is RCDP and how do I become a part of the CDI community? We're going to be dropping links in our bonus resource document that you can get access to in the Facebook community, so go check that out. But I want you to all join me and give a warm welcome to the latest members. And if you see your name popping up, then please do definitely come and say hello. But if you maybe perhaps spot a colleague's name, tag them, let them know that we're celebrating them. So here goes today's list. So we have Regina Bashra, Joe Carroll, John Cameron, Kiran Rami, Laurie Sam, Louisa Mallam, Louise Howard, Paul Butler, Sarah Alberson, Susan Jackson, Teresa Moon, Tim Summers, and Lisa Goodman. Well done and congratulations. Did you see your name on that list, or perhaps you spotted a friend or a colleague's name? If yes, tag them, let them know that we're celebrating them. And as always, hit that like button if you're enjoying these shows and the awesome guests that we bring to you each and every show. Now, we have Michael Tefula here, and he's a multi-talented, not only is he an author, but he's also a chartered accountant. So in 60 seconds, Michael, if I come to you now, tell us in 60 seconds a little bit about yourself. What should our viewers know about you?
Thank you so much, Sabiha, and I'll try and stay within the 60-second time frame, but I'd like to first say it's a privilege to be on the show. Really honored to be able to speak to some of your audiences and your guests. And I guess I've now got maybe 30 seconds left. So I'm a chartered accountant by training. I currently work as a head of finance in a technology company. I'm also an investor in young technology companies, but I'm also an education and training advocate. I've written about 4 books to date, and they're all focused on young people, education, training, and development. It's an area I'm super passionate about, so I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, Michael, under 60 seconds easily. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful. We're well ahead of schedule now. We're going to get carried away. And I mean, you mentioned obviously that you're, author of 4 books, and obviously this is kind of very topical because the theme of what we're going to be talking about today is all kind of connected to your latest book, Is Going to Uni Worth It? And I guess that, the perfect starting question for this is, it's a very loaded question, isn't it? This idea of, is going to uni worth it? quite controversial potentially as a question. So I guess as a starting point, where do you sort of stand on this, and what sort of is the book attempting to address in terms of that question?
That's a really good question, Chris. So I guess just to sort of give some background, I went to university and I had an amazing experience. I think university is an amazing place to grow individually. It's an amazing place to develop your social capital, and you can achieve a whole bunch of wonderful things by going to the university experience. Now, where I stand on the topic is that I think what we need to do, first of all, is just get away from this idea that by default, university is the absolute best choice for absolutely everyone. So where I stand in the position is that I think we need to make sure that we appreciate there's no one size fits all. And actually, if you look at some of the data, which hopefully we'll dig into a bit later on in the show, the advantages of a university education have been shrinking over time. More and more people going to university. We've had things like grade inflation. We've had the returns, so the relative earnings advantage of university graduates come down with time. And then alongside that, we've also had alternative career paths come forward. So there's other things you can do after school to develop your career and grow as an individual. So my sort of starting point on the discussion is that we absolutely have to move away from making university the default choice. When I was at school, a lot of the advice you got was you either go to university or there's no other sort of option to take on. And especially those students who were doing really well academically, the default choice and the default nudge from the education system was you have to take this path. But today, with rising student debt, the living cost, the cost of living crisis, the fact that there's a bunch of other alternative options out there, really brings forth this question of really interrogating the idea of whether university is worth it. And I guess to be more precise, is it worth it for everyone equally? And that's where the debate can begin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that context is what we're going to dig into a little bit more throughout the episode. It is very important, as you mentioned. But I guess just kind of coming back to the book, because, as you kind of sort of noted there, you yourself are someone who sort of benefit from university, but you're approaching this book in a way that's looking at it from the perspective of, is it right for everyone? So how are you kind of going about that with the book, or how is the book kind of attempting to sort of address that debate?
So I came to the topic with a very, very open mind, and I hope that people that read the book will also come away with an open mind. But the way I've structured my I guess suggestions and thinking on the topic is to really think about the individual. What are the needs of the particular individual? And we can, if you're talking to a young person, or if you have some students asking about what they can do after school, there's a couple of questions you can ask to really ascertain whether one path or the other is more appropriate. And there's 5 sort of key questions to think about. The first one is, does the individual know what they want to do after school? University is great in terms of opening up and broadening your options. But actually, if you already know what you want to do, and it turns out that particular path does not need a degree, you're going to end up spending 3 years and £40,000 to £50,000 of debt, in an area where you could actually get qualified and into the industry relatively quicker. I'll give you a quick example of that. Yeah. Today, you can train as an accountant without a degree. So you can go straight to join one of the big accounting firms, or even some of the smaller ones. So KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, EY, they all offer apprenticeship schemes. And you can start earning and training as an accountant right away, instead of spending 3 years studying accounting and finance, which I did, by the way, which was great from my perspective. But you can do that straight with an accountant. So the first thing to ask is, does someone know what they want to do? And does that particular path require a degree? Of course, if you want to be a doctor, you absolutely have to do a degree. If you want to be an accountant, you don't need a degree. If you want to be a solicitor, you don't need a degree. These are things people are not necessarily aware of. The second thing is that, how do people learn most effectively? Under what learning conditions do they thrive? Are you more practical, or are you more academic? Now, I'm a little bit of both. So I actually enjoyed the academic side of university, but people usually fall on a spectrum, and they'll either lean towards one or the other. And the reality is, to learn effectively, you need a mix of both practice and theory. But for some people, it's just more effective to be in a practical setting, in which case an apprenticeship would be better suited. Now, the other 3 factors probably have less weighting, but the other things to think about are, is the young person or student fully aware of what taking on a student loan means? This is something which I find it's lacking in terms of how much information we give to young people. When you take on student debt, you're making a commitment for 30 to 40 years potentially, right? So the repayment term of student loans is going to increase to 40 years. It's currently 30. You're taking on this obligation, which isn't the same as taking out bank debt, right? So no one's going to come after you if you can't pay it back. You only pay back after you earn a certain amount. But there's implications to taking that student debt that we can touch on later on. And then the fourth thing is to think about whether the individual wants to increase their likelihood of being in a very high earning career. There's some things you can do at university. For example, if you go to a Russell Group university, if you go to Oxford or Cambridge, if you study economics, law, medicine, these are all very high earning careers. And you're more likely to have a high earning career taking that path than perhaps another path. The final point, really depends on the individual, I guess, like all the other points. How much is this idea of building a social network or enhancing your social capital and meeting lots of different people from lots of different places? How important is that to you? And if it is really important, then university can be fantastic in terms of helping you meet people from all sorts of different backgrounds and different parts of the country and different parts of the world potentially. One of the things I really cherished about going to university was meeting international students and meeting people from other parts of the world. To a certain extent, you can get that in the workplace, but you don't get the same variety of people coming from lots of different areas. So an apprenticeship might be slightly weaker in that regard. But again, it depends on how important that is to you. So a lot of nuance here, but I've tried to sort of distill it into 5 sort of key things. Does the person know what they want to do? Under what sort of learning conditions do they thrive? Do they understand this idea of student debt? Are they optimizing for a career where they want to have potentially high earnings, or is that actually less important? And then the 5th thing is, how important is this idea of social networks and social capital? That's also another thing to consider in the discussion. So a lot to chew on there, but I hope I gave an overview of the book in a nutshell.
Oh, you really did. Thank you for that, Michael. Oh my God. And I can definitely see the accountant in you coming out, because the numbers, I can see your face light up when you're talking about the numbers. But you're so right, though. Those numbers matter, because I know I've worked with clients, and I know I've had colleagues, and I've seen it even in our Facebook community where people have posted, practitioners have posted. And speaking of sort of practitioners, what questions have you got for Michael today? Do let us know. Come and join into the conversation. Part of the show, and why we love doing this show, is that we bring you these amazing, phenomenal guests that we have, like Michael today, and that you get access to, that you ask him questions, because Michael has shared really some fantastic tips and sort of kind of questions, even as practitioners, that we can be asking, but also as well sort of kind of helping us to sort of have the latest information around what it looks like to go to university, but also not to go to university, and what those career pathways can look like. And the example of Michael using himself and the career path that he's chosen around accountancy, and how you can now qualify as an accountant without having to go to university, as there are many other career paths now that have opened up as well, thanks to apprenticeships as well. And so it's wonderful. So please do bring those questions in. We love hearing from them. And we love hearing from you as well. I'm going to just bring up something that you just sort of kind of mentioned, and I'm going to go slightly off, which is around the sort of kind of finance stuff, which I'm really happy that you brought in, because I know for, and I've seen this in the sort of kind of communities, professional communities that I'm a part of, where if you have students or young people or older people, I mean, that's one of the myths as well that I want us to sort of explore today as well, is going to university just for young people, or is it now more open, and is apprenticeships open for the more mature learner as well? Around sort of financing and how you finance your if you decide to go to university, how you finance that. And I know sort of kind of, for example, halal Muslim finance has been something that's been repeated and come up multiple times now in the various chat groups that I'm in, where people don't want to take out, the student loan bit due to their sort of kind of ethical, religious reasons. And so what that looks like, and what are the alternatives? And I think in that instance, alternatives are great to have. So that's definitely something that I'd be keen to hear your input in. But let's look at a little bit at the moment, okay, Michael, as to, you've shared with us your experiences and what that value was and what benefits you got. But putting you on the spot here a little bit, is going to university worth it, Michael? I'm going to give you a chance to talk about, how often you see universities versus the apprenticeship debate approached in quite a binary way, and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I probably have a slightly disappointing answer, because university, it's worth it, but also it isn't. It isn't. So there's some data from the Institute of Fiscal Studies that shows that about 1 in 5 students actually end up worse financially by going to university. So they end up in a worse financial position than if they'd taken an alternative path. And also, when you look at how students benefit from university in terms of value, before the tuition fees tripled, more than half of students would say that university was good or very good value for money. That has declined significantly. And actually last year, about a quarter of students believed that university was good value or very good value for money. So there's an objective answer there in terms of, is university worth it? Students are telling us, only a quarter of students are telling us now that it's good value or very good value for money, as opposed to about 50%, a little bit more than 50% before tuition fees tripled. So if we're looking at the question from a value perspective, according to students, it isn't worth it at the moment. And a lot needs to change for that to happen. But I would return to this idea of having what I refer to as a context-specific answer for the particular individual. Sabiha, you've mentioned, some people don't want to take on debt. If you don't want to take on student debt, then actually you have to explore the apprenticeship route or other potential training paths. Now, again, perhaps that individual might want to go to university later. I spoke to one student, for example, who started out as an apprentice, qualified as an apprentice, got earning right away, did not take on any student debt. And that student performed so well on the apprenticeship that they were able to get a scholarship to do a master's degree after their apprenticeship. Now, of course, you can qualify to a degree level under an apprenticeship. So that means there are universities out there that can allow you to then do a master's program with your apprenticeship. So it isn't necessarily a binary choice. There's ways of making paths work for the individual.
I mean, it's great you've mentioned that, Michael, because I think, this is kind of one of the things that perhaps for a lot of careers professionals can kind of be quite concerning, is that often, when we talk about kind of the media is a really good example of this. So I think it was the Telegraph this week that had a headline that was very much built around that idea of, this is how much student debt, and is a British university degree worth much anymore? And it was very sensationalist, and it was designed to kind of, really sort of tickle all of those areas where people kind of might already have an opinion about it or feel one way or another about it. And again, I think, the problem we sometimes face as careers professionals is a lot of that debate is maybe around money, or it's around, the idea of kind of predicted lifetime earnings, which can be quite loaded itself in terms of, are we kind of putting a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy telling people this is what you're likely to do in your life by doing this route? So, I mean, I think this is a really nice way for us to kind of move towards sort of the end of this discussion, is really kind of interrogating that kind of that non-binary, I guess, element of this choice. And I suppose thinking about our viewers that are going to be kind of watching this and thinking, maybe I'm working with younger clients or older clients who are considering both types of training routes or alternatives or those sort of things. And, they've heard a bit of what you've said and they thought, okay, yeah, all of this makes a lot of sense in terms of kind of thinking about the context. Where would you sort of advise professionals to kind of go, or who would you advise professionals to really speak with to kind of keep this conversation going, kind of take this debate further? And what I guess has been most useful for you when you were writing the book in terms of kind of getting some of this knowledge together?
So the most useful thing for me to do was to speak to people who've been who've navigated a variety of paths. So I mentioned one student who actually did an apprenticeship first and then did a master's program afterwards. I also spoke to someone who was doing a degree and then after about 2 years transitioned into a degree apprenticeship while they were doing that program. And also, of course, I met people who started university at a much later age, so they ended up being mature students. So I think the key thing to do here is to speak to people who have experienced and explored a variety of different paths. One thing I sort of actually struggled with when I was writing this book is that this, I guess if you're a career advisor professional and you're thinking about the type of advice you give out, you're taking on quite a bit of responsibility in terms of what you tell, or at least advise people to do with their careers. And I think the way to sort of, or certainly the way I managed that responsibility as I was writing the book, was that you want to sort of provide a variety of options for the individual to think about. And then you want to sort of nudge the individual to explore potential paths that might be right for that person. But it's also worth making the individual appreciate that there's no perfect path, right? There's no kind of perfect path that will be set in stone. And then all of a sudden, your career is set for the next 30 years. The world's very dynamic. The nature of work is changing. I've had about 4 different jobs in my career over the last 10 years. You're always learning, you're always retraining. You have to be dynamic. And I think, we can do a lot in taking away that pressure that this decision is going to be the end all be all for the rest of an individual's career. It's about finding a reasonable choice rather than finding a perfect choice.
I love that. I love that you're saying. And I think for me as well, what I'm picking up on, Michael, is dynamic. It's all too often that we're too rigid. It's like, oh my God, you've made this decision at 16 or 18 or 21, and somehow it's all sort of kind of doom and gloom, and that's what you have to kind of stick to. You can pivot, you can make changes. And I love the fact that you've given those examples of the case studies of the students that you've interacted with as a result of the book that you've written, who have essentially, all of the examples that you've given, they've all pivoted at some point. They've all made different choices. And sometimes at 16, okay, maybe a handful of clients, and maybe as a practitioner, you're watching this right now and you're seeing this in your practice, regardless of where you sort of sit and where you're practicing, whether it's you're working in education or you're working with mature, sort of kind of, C-suite executives, or you're working with women returning back to the workforce, wherever that is. Michael, what I'm picking up from you is that there are options and opportunities, sort of the university, and whether or not to go to university, and whether or not that is a right fit for you, regardless of where you are. Would you say that's fair, regardless of where you are in your career and the phase that you're in?
Absolutely. I think, the thing is, you rightly pointed out, the idea is to be dynamic, right? We are in an increasingly dynamic world, and you have to be able to navigate and adapt to lots of different situations, right? Depending on where the economy is and depending on where job opportunities are. I'll maybe go back to a point Chris raised about, the discussion right now seems to be heavily centered on kind of the financial costs and the financial incentives and all that jazz. I do have an appreciation, and I kind of make it clear in the book as well, that there's other benefits to taking the university path, which is the more expensive path. Certainly in terms of like social capital, social networks. One of the people I spoke to in the book, who's now an entrepreneur and runs their own business, they saw the university choice as an investment in themselves. And actually they met people that they ended up working with in their business afterwards. So, the people that they co-founded this company with ended up being people that they met at the university. Now, how do you put a financial value to that? How do you put financial value to making friends for life? How do you it's other qualities to think about?
Such an important point, Michael. I think what careers professionals watching this will be kind of hopefully clapping their hands together at furiously is really what you're kind of talking about here, is that idea of, as you said, career management skills, and actually, considering this from a, I suppose really learning those career management skills in order to make effective decisions throughout your career about particular training routes, qualification routes, rather than perhaps this idea of having to make it a be-all or end-all decision and a binary decision, when we know for a fact that people, as you've rightly said today, have done both at different times in their life, both apprenticeships, alternative training pathways, higher technical qualifications, and all through maybe a more traditional university route. So I think it's great to hear that from somebody kind of slightly outside of the sector, reinforcing some of the stuff that I think as career professionals we feel like we know, but actually to have that sort of reflected from someone who's been doing the research and has had that experience kind of writing the book is really helpful as well. I appreciate we're coming towards our news section. Michael, you kept it under 60 seconds. We always run out of time. How do we do this? But I think a key thing we really want to do, obviously, at the end of each episode is, if any of our viewers want to keep that conversation going, how do they get in touch with you? How do they find you? And, is there anything more about the book you'd like to mention before we finish?
And where can they get the book as well, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to get the book is just to go into Amazon and type in, is going to Uni Worth it? Is going to Uni Worth it? Type that into Amazon, or type in Michael Tefula. You'll be able to find a copy of the book. If you Google Michael Tefula, you'll find my website, my LinkedIn, and my Twitter account. I'm very accessible on Twitter. You can just send me a DM if you wish to chat and explore the topic a bit further. And also, check out my publisher, Trotman. They've got a bunch of other career books that are amazing as well. So it's worth exploring that as well.
And if you are a career professional worth their clout, then you will definitely have a Trotman book on your bookshelf for sure. I would be very surprised if you are working in the career sphere and you don't have at least one book that has been published by Trotman. So as Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. We've had people sort of showing appreciation to have you here on the show today as well. I know that usually we do get lots of follow-up as well, so thank you so much for that. Chris, final thoughts before we sort of kind of head on over to the news section?
Yeah, thanks, Sabiha. Yeah, we're almost kind of keeping to time, which is wonderful news. I have to stop saying that in future episodes. And thanks, Michael, again for joining us. I think what this has taught us in a very, very short kind of period of conversation is it is certainly not a binary debate when it comes to the idea of sort of is going to uni worth it. And I think for those who kind of watched it, who are wanting to interrogate that a little bit more, do check out Michael's book and do get in touch, engage with Michael on LinkedIn and Twitter and keep the debate going. And that will bring us very, very nicely on to this week's CDI news. So over to you, Sabiha. What have you been reading about this week, germane to the Career Development Institute?
Thank you. Well, I mean, the first news is going to be a little bit of a shocker for some of you if you haven't already picked up this latest news, but I have got something really hot off the press that just literally landed in my inbox in less than 24 hours ago. And that is that first, if you haven't already heard, the Bliss Hill event has been cancelled. The 100 years of career celebration at Bliss Hill, Victorian Town, which was due to take place on the 18th of June, has now been cancelled. With the growing fears around the cost of living crisis and general nervousness from the war in Ukraine and other sort of events, means a lot of people are cutting down on their spending and limiting their activities. So the CDI wanted to thank everybody involved. It was hugely, and for those of you that had already booked your tickets, please know that there will be refunds issued if you haven't already received a notification about that. So please do check out and look out for that. Obviously, this is disappointing, but the CDI are now focused on replanning in light of this decision, and the CDI are working on the UK CDI Development Award ceremony as an online event now, and it is going to be taking place, and this is what's just been released, on the 20th and the 22nd. In a similar format to last year, CDI are still going ahead with the it will look like, and information and where you can go to book tickets. It will be a free event to join on Monday the 20th as well as Wednesday the 22nd, and links for all that information will be made available on our show resources document. The schools competition associated with this will still be going ahead. They're just going to make some final tweaks of how it's going to be judged. I'll give you more updates about that in the next show, so do look out for that. Also as well, your invitation to participate in this year's survey, the CDI Big Listen, is now out, and the CDI are delighted to invite you once again to share your views of where you stand and where you see the sector going in 2022. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because the CDI as an organisation wants to understand the needs of its members, and it's vital to guide the work that we all do on behalf of the membership and the profession. By completing the survey, you're enabling the CDI to develop future services and support their members and membership in the best possible way. The feedback from last year was over 550 plus members gave their feedback, and it would be great to see another big response as well. Now, the deadline and the link the survey will be dropped in the show resources document, so please again look out for that. And the deadline is Monday the 6th of June, so you've still got time to take part. And then finally for today, I've got the digital tools for career development work. This is now been expanded, and there is a greater choice of digital tools available on the website to use either in your own work or in the work that you do with your clients. It's on the new web page. You'll find links to some of the digital tools that have been recommended by CDI members also. And if you'd like to make any suggestions for any digital tools to be included on the listing, then you can complete the form as well. So head on over to the new page on the CDI website. And I have a few more things as well, which I'll include in the bonus section within shows resources document. So that's me done. Chris, what have you got for the main news feed this week?
Thanks, Sabiha. Yeah, and again, just for those who are maybe watching the show for the first time, when we're talking about the show resources document, we are talking about what we post on the CDI Facebook community of practice after each show. So if, for example, you are a CDI member and you've not come across this Facebook group before, please sign up to it. It's got over 1,000 members now, offering lots of really useful advice and insights. It's a lovely community, and also where we share all of the resources from each show in the form of a PDF document after We Are Careers is finished every fortnight. So do check that out if you haven't come across it before. I've got a bunch of really, really interesting news items from across the careers sector, which I'm going to include. Can't go through all of them as there's far too many. But my top 3 for this week, there's a really interesting report out from Skills Builder Partnership. They've kind of done some research tracking essential skills across kind of the UK through adults, but also looking back through kind of education. And it's really interesting because, again, it alludes to quite a lot of the stuff that we're talking about in terms of where do people develop these 8 essential skills that Skills Builder have come up with. How do they do that? And some quite interesting data about how that's more challenging for people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Our second item is a really, really interesting LinkedIn thread that came up earlier in the week. Could you describe your job to a 10-year-old from Rob Stevenson, who's a mental health campaigner? Had some great kind of input from members of the careers community thinking about how do we kind of contextualize or describe what we do in a really simple way. It was a really, really nice thread, so do check that out. And then number 3, there's an article from The Guardian all about how parents are keeping up with changes in the job market or not, as sometimes the case may be, and actually, how much of that needs to be down to careers professionals kind of understanding labour market information, or more about, again, teaching those career management skills, those vital career management skills that allow people to be flexible, adaptive, dynamic, as Michael spoke about today. So 3 really, really useful, I think, news items there, and lots more besides in the news that we'll be including in the show resources document. So that brings us very, very nicely to the end of this week's show. Do join us again on Wednesday, the 8th of June at 12 o'clock. We're going to be joined by lecturer in career development from the International Centre for Excellence in Guidance Studies, Tom Staunton, and we're going to be talking about, can labour market information be used to support social justice? Really, really vital topic, one that's been covered in the Adventures in Career Development blog before, and career development for social justice, but it's something that we've had a lot of requests for from viewers, and hopefully you'll find it a really useful episode. So all that's remains to be said is I hope you all have a wonderful fortnight. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. A huge thank you to Michael for joining us. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Really wonderful. Really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you.
And as always, huge thank you to Sabiha for being a great co-host, and thank you to everybody watching at home. We hope you have a good week.